This is where we need some theme music for Buffalo Rumblings Live. But welcome in to Buffalo Rumblings Live. My name is Matt Warren. I'm the senior editor at BuffaloRumblings.com, and we're joined today by Joe Buscaglia from WGR 550 in Buffalo. Joe, say hi.
Hi.
There you go. Joe is, of course, in the dormitory, or sorry, residence hall, whatever you want to say.
Nah, dorm's good. Jail cell is good too.
He's coming to us live from St. John Fisher College in beautiful Pittsford, New York, where the Bills have had two public training camp practices, in addition to all their fun meetings and workouts and things like that. So let's just go with that. Joe, how have the two practices been? General.
Well, so far, I mean, not a lot. You can't really get too much out of them, but the big takeaway for everyone today was how well Sammy Watkins did, and he's always going to dominate those types of practices. I mean, he's just elite when it comes to the physical characteristics, the run and catch, the ability to high point the ball. I mean, he catches almost everything around him. Just elite speed. He made Leotis McKelvin look silly today on a fly route down the field. So there's a lot of things to like from Sammy Watkins, but all the same, I mean, you can't get too much out of it because they're not hitting just yet, but I'm sure it's still been very interesting to finally see these guys get on the field and get that rust off their boots. That was a big part of it yesterday, for sure.
Yeah, and on that fly route that you're talking about, it's a little bit, like you said, hard to say without pads because he was able to get off the jam so quickly, but is McKelvin backing off the jam because he doesn't have pads on? One thing we can take away from it, though, pretty good deep elite speed, and then that leaping ability. Talk about that catch that he had where he got hurt catching it in triple coverage today.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tipped pass, and E.J. Manuel originally threw the ball, and Sammy Watkins did what Sammy Watkins does best and went up, found the ball, went up and high pointed it in between, I think, Nigel Bradham, maybe Jonathan Meeks, and I want to say Kamal McElwain, but I'm not exactly sure. There's the photo of it somewhere, but there was three guys all crowding around him, and he ends up getting poked in the eye and has to get looked at by Bud Carpenter for a couple minutes, which had everyone on Twitter freaking out for a solid 7 minutes. But I know I was partially to blame for that, but
You really are.
yeah, definitely. But Sammy Watkins, he displayed exactly why he's just an elite talent heading into this NFL season, and now it's really just on him to be able to pick up the nuances of the position and learn as he goes along in training camp, especially in the preseason. That's where I'm really interested to see him going up against some different competition.
When you're talking about nuance, what specific things are you looking for out of him to pick up through the offseason into his first full NFL season?
Well, I think with him, one thing that I really loved about Robert Woods last year and what he did as an NFL receiver is he had the innate ability to not let whatever was happening with the play affect his route. He was always within himself, he never shortcutted the route, never really did anything to jeopardize that route and give the defender an opportunity to catch up. And that's really the nuance of the position that I'm talking about. I mean, the breakdowns, Sammy Watkins already has that. He has the elite speed. We know he can run a post. We know he can run a fly. We know he can run a bubble screen. That part of it isn't really in question. But what happens when a play starts to break down and what is his initial impulse? When E.J. Manuel spots him or he spots a little soft coverage on his own, does he try and sit there, or does he continue along the route and give the defender an ample opportunity to catch up to him? Those are really the questions that I have that I won't see until he gets on film for the first time.
Yeah, we had a few questions about Sammy Watkins in our comments section. Dan Lavoie, one of our draft nicks, said, just simply, how awesome is it that Sammy Watkins is a Buffalo Bill? I think we can pretty much say it's pretty awesome. But NJT34 said, do you think Sammy will score more than 20 touchdowns this year, or we'll have to settle for like 15 to 19? I'll let you take that one.
Well, 20 is quite. You know what? He'll score 30. No, I'm just kidding. I think he'll slide in somewhere between 5 and 10. I think he'll be a very good player for this team. And it really all depends on the man throwing him the rock. That's what it all boils down to. I know fans are probably tired of hearing that, but Sammy Watkins' effectiveness inherently lies within the effectiveness of E.J. Manuel. And no matter what, I mean, that's how the two are tied together. But to both their strong suits, Sammy Watkins is very good at making people miss, and if you get the ball in his hands quickly, we saw it all the time his junior year at Clemson. When you get the ball in his hands, he has the ability to make those people miss and gain yards that you probably think he shouldn't have and pad those stats of the quarterback. So that could also help E.J. Manuel very much so.
Yeah, and if Watkins keeps displaying that leaping ability, I'm sure that'll help too. Well, that was the big story on the field with Sammy Watkins' big day, but there's a lot of stories going on off the field that might actually be even bigger than the practices going on the field. Let's start with Marcell Dareus. Dareus was reported tonight that Dareus was actually in Alabama today for a court date. Can you explain what kind of happened at that court date and how it's going to affect him moving forward with that Alabama synthetic marijuana arrest? Got it.
Yeah, my man Jeff Russo with the scoop on that. So good job by him of Channel 7. If you don't follow him, make sure you do, because he's a damn good reporter and he's good at what he does. With Dareus, what he did, he went down to Alabama to meet with a judge who formally accepted him into the pretrial program. Essentially what that does, it gives him, as long as the program is completed successfully, it gives him a chance to be able to rid himself of the charges as long as he stays within the guidelines. And part of that is tied to the substance policy of the NFL and that being monitored, as well as checking in periodically with the court to kind of see how everything's going along. So if everything goes smoothly, he can remove the charges from himself, avoid those felony charges, because it was a dumb mistake on his part. I mean, and I think the thing that was most, I guess a little bit disconcerting was that it was the synthetic stuff, which is the stuff that you can't find on the tests. So that maybe sort of gave a certain air of maybe what it's a challenging area, because that stuff can't get found out. But it's a positive step for Marcell Dareus. It's probably a very good reason why he was excused from camp, but still, he's got to get his butt in shape, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And now that he's in the substance abuse program, if he does get caught with any performance-enhancing drugs in his system, or I guess we'll say any banned substances, because marijuana, whatever you want to talk about, but performance-enhancing, I don't know if that's the case. But if he gets caught with any of those in his system, that's an automatic suspension, right? 4 games. Now that he's in the system.
Oh yeah, because he's in it. I thought you meant just based on the previous, but
no.
I think I believe. I mean, we haven't had to deal with this in quite some time. I mean, Nigel Bradham got hit with possession last year, and he didn't get suspended. Those charges were dropped, but I believe it's an auto suspension of that 4 games. I think you're correct there.
But that would, again, just to clarify, be for an additional occurrence,
right.
Or an additional violation. Okay, so what actually is going on with his other one? The one was it Amherst? I can't remember.
No, it was in Hamburg. It was
Hamburg,
in
even closer.
Good old Blaisdell, New York, right next to the McKinley Mall, right next to the Mongolian Buffet.
Sorry.
I used to live over that area. It's a busy intersection too, which is kind of weird.
But is that playing it all into this? Do we know anything about a possible suspension for Dareus? What are you hearing?
No, nothing yet. I mean, it's really the NFL and just what they're deciding to do. I think what helps him here is that he's not facing felony charges, but all the same, it's the second incident within a month, and the NFL has to take all of that into consideration. And I mean, it happened right under the nose of the Bills. I mean, it was literally maybe a 3-minute drive from Ralph Wilson Stadium, and him and Jerry Hughes, who was allegedly the other driver. I mean, that's a mistake you just don't want from 2 guys who are very, very big parts of your football team. So I think with Marcell, it could play into things, but it's a wait-and-see approach right now. I'm not hearing anything because the NFL has been mum on the whole thing. They haven't even announced suspensions for Josh Gordon, Aldon Smith, Greg Hardy. There's another one who I can't even think of, but there's a lot of guys who are facing potential bans here.
Right, and of course the other big story with Dareus right now is that he failed his conditioning test. I guess would have had to have been this weekend, right? Isn't that when they would have taken it?
On Saturday. He failed the running test, from what Marone said today.
Okay, and so that's just like, down and back, whatever, some sort of distance and a set amount of time. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think it might vary for positions, but I'm not sure on that. I
Yeah, I
mean, it
think that's
should, right?
one would think. I mean,
Yeah.
but so is that a concern to you that he's missing the first week of camp because he's apparently out of shape?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's got one job, and he gets paid millions of dollars to do it. I mean, I
Right.
know heading into my job, if I wasn't fully prepared for camp and didn't really check in with sources or anything like that, I know I would get a slap on the wrist from my employers. It's all the same. It doesn't really matter the level of pay that you get. You need to be prepared for those situations, and I understand the the side of it where people feel sorry for Marcel because he's going through all this stuff in the off season and everything like that. But all the same, you need to get yourself ready, especially in a season where jobs are on the line and a season where people continually to push out the word playoffs and expect that sort of season from this team. You need to have yourself in shape because he is one of the most important pieces to this roster. I did that top 20 talents piece and I put him at the top of it because he is, to me, someone that just progressed at such a high level last year, and I think he's got more and he's got more potential in the tank here. And because of all that, I think him showing up to camp out of shape, or at least not in the shape that they require for him to practice, is a little disconcerting for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not in the camp of I feel sorry for Darius. I mean, obviously he went through some stuff, but I'm not giving him that excuse. I just don't necessarily see him missing the first week of an already extended training camp as being, I don't know, the biggest deal. But that goes to your point. I don't think you think it's a big deal, say physically or even like mentally on the field. You think that it's a preparation issue, and he's not necessarily taking his job seriously. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but isn't that kind of where you're going?
I mean, that goes all along the same lines. This is a guy who, from what sources told me, when he was suspended for the first time, or he was got that slap on the wrist for missing the first quarter in the team's 15th game of the season, for being habitually late to team meetings. And it took until week 15 to do it for Doug Marrone to say, okay, enough's enough. You're sitting for a little bit of time. And then he goes and does it again the next week.
Next day.
And from a preparation standpoint, it just goes down into training camp now. I mean, he participated at OTAs. He participated at minicamp. He needs to be on the field. He needs to be able to get out there. And I don't want to beat this thing to death because he's going to get back on the field. He's still going to be a big piece of the roster. It's just a little concerning from Marrone's standpoint, and especially considering that he talked about getting Marcel Darius the help and putting a hands-on approach on that. And the first thing that happens with Marcel Darius when they get to camp is that he can't get on the field because he's not in shape enough. So it is a little concerning, but all the same, he's going to be a guy that they're going to depend on heavily as long as he's available to them.
And you went right to where I was going to actually go with this. Is Marrone? I wrote at the time. I wrote a piece kind of critical of Doug Marrone, saying that he was going to get a little bit more personally involved with Marcel Darius because I didn't think that it was necessarily his job to do. And when Darius shows up and can't participate, like you said, does this really look bad on Doug Marrone, or is this kind of like, well, he hasn't seen him because he's been away?
Yeah, and they have to have a hands-off approach in that month. I mean, they can certainly communicate a little bit, but all in all, that is the players' last time to be able to be on their own, enjoy time with their family, and do whatever it is their little heart tells them to do. And with Marcel Darius, I think him not being in shape might reflect poorly on Doug Marrone at the beginning, but I think Marrone has him in camp. I think he's going to continue to stay on him, and as long as he's under his watch in Pittsford and being in the dorms and everything like that, I think Doug Marrone's going to have that hands-on approach. So we'll see how long it takes for him to get to where he needs to get to. But if I were a betting man, I think he'll be back before too long.
Okay. Just last question about Darius from Dan Lavoie. Again, if a team offered you a first-round pick for Darius, would you take that deal?
Probably. I mean, I don't view defensive tackles as a first-round commodity. and I think you can find good defensive tackles. But in terms of, do you want to give this guy a huge amount of guaranteed money with what you've seen from him over the past 3 months? I mean, that's a major question that the Bills have to ask themselves, and they bought themselves some time on answering that question by exercising the 5th-year option for him. But he needs to prove to them that he has found a level of maturity and a level of trust that they can put into him as a player on this roster, because I know he's going to be making some pretty good money next year. But that's it. That's the long and short of it. They're not guaranteeing him $40 million over a 6-year contract. They are looking at him and saying, hey, you know what, we're going to guarantee your 2015. Prove to us that you're worth a big contract, and we'll go from there. They know he's good enough. They know he's at a level of which he can get to an elite level and become one of the best defensive tackles in the game. But at this point, would you pay the guy? That's a serious question I think everyone has to ask themselves.
Exactly, and the guaranteed part of it is the thing. He's not going to sign a contract as a former first-round pick, as a former Pro Bowler, that isn't going to guarantee him a hefty chunk of change. And do the Bills want to make that guarantee to him when they can't really control whether he shows up on time or in shape? So yeah, it's definitely, like you said, an interesting question.
They just need to make get a more informed decision on it before they make that assessment on it, and that's what it really all boils down to.
We are with Joe Buscaglia from WGR 550 in Buffalo, New York. That's the sports radio station that covers the Buffalo Bills, and Joe's one of the sideline reporters for the Buffalo Bills radio network as well. We get to see his face tonight, though. His hair's way better than mine, isn't it?
It's a rarity that I get to show my face while I'm talking. I think a lot of people thought I was just a kind of a myth or something like that I didn't actually have a face. A lot of people think I'm like 50-something years old if they're not.
You are not. You are younger than both Brian and me. You are younger than me, which, whatever.
How old are you?
I'm 30.
You're 30? I'm 27.
Yeah. You mentioned it to Howard, was it yesterday or today? Was it Friday or Monday?
It was this morning. I made a young crack with him. I'm like, I wasn't born then. You got to carry me on this trivia thing. Yeah.
Oh, well. So we got to kind of sidetrack there, but that's okay. This is, it's not radio. Nobody's paying us for ad time. Anyway, the other big off-field story, in my opinion, that just kind of hasn't gone away because it really can't, is the Cordy Glenn conversation. And I know you kind of vented about it on Twitter just a little bit. Like, we can't know and we don't know, but that's really frustrating. Are you hearing anything else that you can even remotely report?
No, I can't. I mean, I've heard things, but nothing I can report, and it's tough to really know exactly what the deal is without the full details. And it's one of those things where if you report just the first thing you hear, it's not good for your professional career as a reporter. So, I mean, there's some rumblings out there, but it's just a matter of him passing through some tests, getting clearance from the medical staff, and then going from there. I think with Cordy, he's a very important piece of this offense. Doug Marrone knows it. Doug Whaley knows it. Everybody knows it. I think he's the best offensive lineman they have. And with that said, they would really appreciate him getting the clearance. But if he's not ready to do it, then I mean, you can't force the guy in. And to me, that's why I was a little looking at the situation and just saying, hey, you know what? It's a little bit more of a story than the Marcel Darius thing, just because we know why Marcel Darius is missing time. We don't know why Cordy Glenn is missing time, and that mystery surrounding it is what's really driving this to be such a huge story, because we don't have any definition of how much time he may or may not miss, and that's really why it's such a big thing.
And it reminded us at Buffalo Rumblings a little bit about the Chris Hairston situation last year. One of the things we kept commenting on was him walking around the field at St. John Fisher, and then because he was on the same list, and and so eventually it progressed into him not playing at all. Are they worried that he's going to miss part or all of the season?
Yeah, I asked Doug Marrone if he's fearing the worst with Cordy Glenn, and his direct response to me was, "I'm sorry, guys, I can't talk about it." So there's
very helpful.
Read into that whatever you want, but I think Doug Marrone was just essentially saying, guys, stop asking me. I can't give you anything. Oh, I mean, I understand there are definite rules in place where you cannot give away this information of medical stuff that didn't happen in the confines of football. So since he is on the non-football illness list, it falls under that little guideline, and for that reason, it's not the Bills' fault that this is kind of becoming a huge story. They can't legally give out that information unless they want a suit on their hands. But I think with Glenn, it's concerning enough because he is such a high-profile player.
Now, is he at St. John Fisher? Have you seen him? Do you even know if he's in the building?
Yep. I saw him today. Saw him walk away from practice. Okay. He's done some things. I don't know to what degree he's done things. I saw him leave about, I want to say, an hour and 15 minutes into the practice, went back to the locker room area. But yeah, he's definitely here. I saw him at practice yesterday too. Okay,
and he was kind of in and out of the lineup during, what was it, OTAs or minicamp too? Like he was in minicamp for one day, then out.
So yeah, he was excused for the first day of minicamp, and then the second and third days he got some reps, but really it was mostly I think Chantrell Henderson getting the reps at left tackle.
Yeah, that's a big leap for that 7th round draft pick to be the starting left tackle of this team going into E.J. Manuel's kind of season, which is so important on his resume. He named Chantrell Henderson the starting left tackle. I'm like, this is going to be interesting. Well, then of course everything happened yesterday with Henderson tweaking his hip, and then Chris Harrison being the 3rd left tackle going through the rotation just this offseason. But anyway, Chantrell Henderson was back on the field today, and people kind of calmed down a little bit.
And all was right in the world, for sure.
Well, sure. All was right in the world of non-padded football practices.
Yes, indeed.
So let's go down that offensive line. What have you seen from the offensive line so far that has maybe surprised you? I know there's not a lot of hitting, so go with that.
Yeah, I haven't seen them do any one-on-ones with the defensive linemen yet, and I'm one of those junkies that loves watching that stuff and tracking who wins what battle and everything like that. So I haven't seen too much, but left tackle is a concern right now. I'm not going to lie. I mean, Chantrell Henderson played right tackle at Miami. Let's just put it at that. And he was a little stiff just from watching him and what he was able to do at Miami. He's got loads of potential. He's humongous. He's 6'8", maybe just a shade under 6'8". I mean, he's got the weight. He's got the reach that you want, but he doesn't necessarily have the movement skills just yet. And they're putting him on the left side against a renewed pass rusher in Jerry Hughes. And Hughes has had one of the best minicamp / OTA sessions of any player on the team, and he's translated that into the first couple of days of training camp, and Hughes has just been in the backfield. I mean, yesterday, Hughes got by Chris Hairston so easily on a few different occasions. Today, he beat Chantrell Henderson a couple of times. I think no matter you can look at it two different ways. It's either Jerry Hughes is having a darn good training camp, or they need to worry about the left tackle position, and I would err towards the latter with a little bit of the former mixed in.
Yeah, I remember Aaron Maven even getting shut down by Ed Wang.
Ed Wang, what a name! I mean, that was one of the biggest waste of a picks I've ever seen. Seriously, I remember watching the Senior Bowl that year. This was before they had film out on all these guys. I remember watching him and saying, gosh, he cannot play. I can't believe some team's going to draft him. And then the Bills take him in the 5th round. So he was cut after, I think, 1.5 years.
Yeah, because it's Buffalo. Yeah, that's really what we're going with. Do you see Doug Legursky being able to hold off some of those young up-and-coming guys that the Bills have added to their roster in the last year?
I see him holding off Cyril Richardson, at least from what I've seen so far. The J.J. Ungas of the world, the Mark Aspers of the world. I need to see more from them. I think really the more compelling person to watch here is Chris Hairston on the inside. For the first time in training camp, and certainly a continuation from what happened at minicamp, Hairston split reps with the first team at right guard. Urbic got some reps as well, but Hairston is that guy to kind of look at as a potential tackle guard swing. Legursky is more of the backup center / interior lineman guy. It's really all going to depend on what happens with Craig Urbick, because if Urbick loses that job outright, I think he could probably play center. He's big enough to do it. And I think it really I put out a semi-confusing offensive lineman primer not too long ago because there's so many different layers. If one thing happens, then a bunch of other dominoes are going to fall. And I could see a situation where Doug Legursky makes this team. I can also see a situation where he doesn't make this team and Craig Urbick's a backup lineman. So there's so much to consider because they do have those young guys like you brought up.
But you don't think that those young guys are going to be, say, pushing for starting spots this training camp?
No, I don't think so. I think Chris Williams is their left guard. Eric Wood's obviously the center. And right guard, I think, will either be Urbick or Chris Hairston just because they're not really giving opportunities to those other guys. Asper is playing mostly tackle at this portion. Unga is playing guard, but isn't particularly showing off or being able to be seen pretty well. And Cyril Richardson can't escape the third team. I'm very concerned about Cyril Richardson even coming close to making this roster based off what I've seen so far.
Okay. Because there's people on our blog that just, they want to put him right next to Quanjo and just run people over.
He can't move. He can't move. It's a big part of the game. And that's what's concerning, especially against quick twitch defensive tackles.
Well, he at least passed his conditioning test, one would
Hooray
think.
for that.
Oh, this offensive line conversation has just been so interesting. Moving to tight end, is anyone going to take over Scott Chandler's starting spot?
I think the only guy that can do it is Tony Moeaki, and I still think Scott Chandler is going to have a prominent role on this offense, but I think Moeaki represents a little bit more athletic version of a tight end that has had success in the league. If those who have followed me and have read my work and have listened to me on the air, I'm not particularly high on Chris Gregg. I know some people are. I just don't really see the deception in his game to be able to set people up and be able to get down the field in a hurry. I don't see it, and I guess that might be a me problem more than anything. But I think Moeaki is more of the type that could challenge and potentially get some playing time and definitely fit into that role because he has shown some athleticism throughout camp. He has shown that his knees are looking good at this point. You never know what happens in the first preseason game, as we well know from last year. But I think Moeaki would probably be the biggest challenger, but Scott Chandler is the guy more than likely.
Is it going to come down to Moeaki versus Chris Gregg for that, I guess, third and final, what you would call tight end spot?
See, I think Moeaki is more secure than Gregg right now. I think it boils down to whether or not they want to keep 4 tight ends.
Oh, okay.
And the kind of roles they're looking for. I think Lee Smith is safe on this team. He's basically an appendage of the offensive line. That's his job. I remember one of my favorite Lee Smith stories is he caught a pass a couple of years ago, and Scott Chandler was blocking down the field, and Scott goes to him after the play. He's like, "Hey, why didn't you cut inside? I was blocking him outside." Lee Smith looks at him and goes, "I don't cut." So with Lee Smith, he has limited athleticism, and that's pretty much the perfect story for him.
Yeah,
but yeah, Chandler, Smith, and Moeaki, I think, are pretty safe bets. Chris Gregg's that bubble guy to me.
And if they do keep 4 tight ends, it'll probably reflect on what, that tight end position, or sorry, the fullback position, the running back kind of conglomeration.
Yeah, Evan Rodriguez is pretty interesting here because he's athletic. They gave him some time. They made Frank Summers inactive just to see Evan Rodriguez in action last year for at least one game. And I think he's someone to monitor during this. But they haven't given him any reps at tight end whatsoever throughout any of the OTAs, any mini camp. They have a specific role for him in mind, and I think that's more of that H-back role. So with Rodriguez, he's someone to look at. I think another thing to look at is just the number game at all the other positions.
Right.
If Dustin Hopkins shows he's a kickoff specialist like they think he can be, do you want a Dustin Hopkins on your team, or do you want a Chris Gregg on your team who's likely going to be inactive for the majority of the season unless there's an injury? So there are questions that need to be answered with the other positions that we just don't have right now.
We are a half an hour into Buffalo Rumblings Live with Joe Buscaglia from WGR 550. You can find him on Twitter at Joe Buscaglia.
Yes.
If you don't know how to spell his name and for some reason aren't following him on Twitter.
Damn my Italian heritage for having that silent G in there. I'm sorry, everyone. I blame my dad.
The other thing we have to talk about 30 minutes in is the fact that we've mentioned the backup kicker, but we haven't really talked about Fred Jackson, C.J. Spiller, or any of the running backs. So let's go there. How do you? We know that Fred and C.J. are both going to be on the team, and probably Bryce Brown and Anthony Dixon and all this other stuff. How do you see carries kind of shaking out in camp so far? And do you think that that's going to translate to the preseason and then the regular season?
Camp touches don't matter. I mean they have guys constantly going in and out of the lineup no matter what. The only thing you can really get from a lineup perspective when you go to camp are the initial where they line up initially. It's like throughout 11-on-11s, if they're, I don't know, 2 or 3 series in, you'll see some third-team defensive backs with some first-team linebackers and the second-team defensive line. It's just really a muddle of players out there. So the touches really don't matter at the camp. But I think what you'll end up seeing with Spiller, Jackson, Bryce Brown, and Anthony Dixon as well, I think you'll see Spiller get the majority of the touches. And I'm not just talking about carries. I think they want to utilize him in the passing game better because it was criminal how badly they used him in the passing game last year. He averaged over 5 yards less per catch in 2013 than he did in 2012. They need to figure it out quickly. And I know the high ankle sprain played into it a little bit. However, they weren't doing it when he was healthy. And that is very concerning for the early part of the season. I think they miscast him. I think he's someone that they definitely need to look at and getting him out into open spaces. And I think we're going to see that with maybe some formations where he and Fred Jackson are on the field at the same time. Maybe he and Bryce Brown are on the field at the same time. Maybe Bryce Brown and Fred Jackson are on the field at the same time. I think we're going to see some 2 running back sets. And certainly Fred Jackson is going to get his, but I think Bryce Brown's going to eat into it. I like him a lot. I think he's got a lot of talent.
So for folks that haven't been out to training camp, describe Bryce Brown in like one sentence. How could you've never seen him play the running back position before? What's Bryce Brown?
Explosive first step, good size, good vision, fumbling problems. That's basically what it boils down to, and he's got low mileage too. I mean, I keep forgetting the name. It was someone with the last name Marino. He's on Twitter. I think it's Joe Marino. I want to say Joe Marino. I mean, he put out a great stat on Bryce Brown that said he's got under 300 carries from college and NFL combined. That is totally low mileage. He's 22 years old. I mean, this guy, they have probably a big future for him ahead because Fred Jackson's on the last year of his deal and he's 33. And C.J. Spiller is about to be 27 years old. He's on the last year of his deal too. So there's all of these different things to consider. So it was smart of them to at least get a guy in place. And if they lose both Jackson and C.J. Spiller, then they can draft a guy to play alongside Bryce Brown and be able to have that nice 1-2 punch yet again. So I like Bryce Brown, and I like what he's done so far. He fumbled a couple of times during OTAs, and that part was concerning, but I think he'll be able to get things together.
How's he? What do you mean he's fumbling during OTAs? He's not even getting hit.
Someone strafed at the ball, and it came loose.
Was it? He's got it duct tape it to his hand. Can
they still do OTAs? It was OTAs.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to distress you so much, Matt.
Well, okay. I just don't like. I don't like the turnovers. They make me sad. So anyway, there was a fight today. Can we talk about the fight? One swing? Was it one swing and a push? What was the fight between Robert Woods and Denoris Searcy today?
It was Robert Woods being Robert Woods, I think. I mean, he can get under the skin of some people.
That's what I tweeted out. I'm like, he's developing this reputation. Remember, he got kicked out of the Dolphins game for taking a swing, and is that his? What's his MO?
If you watch him on the field, I mean, he gets in the pads of some guys, and it can get heated with Robert Woods. But I like that fiery aspect out of him. Not to the point in which he's gonna take a swing and get his butt thrown out for the rest of the game. But I think with him, that's sort of an edge that you like to have, just not when it goes too far. And Marrone all but scolded both players in the press conference afterwards, saying, hey, you know what, we got to be smarter than that. We don't want that here. So I think the message will sink in for both guys. Immediately after it happened, Denoris Cersei was taken to the side by Donnie Henderson, and Henderson said something to him. I don't know exactly what he said, but he said something, and Cersei got back in, and he was a happy little camper, so to speak. and so, yeah, that part of it, it's fun because it's part of training camp, and it's the first skirmish, but Marrone clearly doesn't want it. And every time one of those have happened, it's not just, boys will be boys. It's, we don't want that at all.
Right. How has the chemistry been amongst the wide receivers and the quarterbacks so far? Has there been a lot of balls on the ground, or has it been a pretty clean camp as far as that goes?
When TJ Graham is the receiver, there's been a lot of balls on the ground.
Oh.
But yeah, no, I'm serious. He made a nice catch along the sideline early on today in one of the one-on-ones where it was a physical battle against the cornerback, but then he had an opportunity where he was 3 yards down the field from the cornerback and it went right through his hands. So it's a give and take with TJ Graham. For the most part, these guys have been able to pick it up and run with it. Sammy Watkins has had a very nice training camp so far, as we mentioned at the top. Robert Woods is the same guy that we came to know last year. Mike Williams, he had a pass batted away from him, I think, a couple of times, but other than that, it's been pretty smooth sailing for him. And Chris Hogan is just being Chris Hogan at training camp and being very impressive. Same thing with Marquise Goodwin. So it has been good so far. It's just a matter of whether or not the quarterbacks are getting them to the right areas of where they can actually catch the ball. That's been the biggest concern so far.
The only wide receiver that people have been asking about that I didn't hear you mention was Marcus Easley. Do you think he's going to be able to stick as something more than a special? It's hard for me to say this because I know that's his role, is really special teamer and emergency wide receiver, but you didn't mention him at all in that wide receiver spiel, and you mentioned Hogan. Is Hogan going to be able to kind of take Easley's roster spot?
I think Hogan has a better chance of making this roster than Easley right now, absolutely. And I know what Easley did last year on special teams, but one of their main focuses this whole offseason was to bring guys in to be able to compete better on special teams. And Marcus Easley made all the tackles, but he was the only guy that really got down the field and was able to be there. Now they have guys like Corey Graham. They have guys like Anthony Dixon, who's a very noted special teams player. Keith Rivers, who can play special teams. Preston Brown, who is added as the third-round linebacker and special teams guy. These are all players that they think can figure in to be a bona fide piece in this special teams unit. So is Marcus Easley's safety all but guaranteed? No way. I don't think so at all. In fact, I think he could be very challenged by a player who has some good offensive upside and has some special teams experience and has shown to coaches that he can be in the right place. That's Kevin Elliott. Keep an eye out for him.
All right. Well, let's go to the quarterbacks before we move to the defense. What do you take out of training camp practices with the quarterbacks when they can't get hit?
Not too much. With E.J. Manuel, it's very good to see him roll out and kind of let the wall go down a bit where he's just back in the pocket thinking too much. When he rolls out and finds his guy and reads the coverage perfectly, that's where he was strongest on his first night. He had a play today that I loved, and he was essentially throwing a slant pattern to Sammy Watkins. It was about 12 yards down the field. He fed it over the linebacker's hands, and it dropped in right as the cornerback was trailing Watkins and the safety was coming over to help. And it created what could have been a hit for the receiver, but he's trusting a receiver to make a play in a tight window. And that's something we just didn't see with E.J. Manuel last year, and that was one of my biggest critiques of him. Now, granted, it's one rep at training camp, and he didn't have anyone live trying to come after him and take out his legs. But what he did is definitely interesting and definitely something that he's going to be looking to build on. But we can't glean too much until the opposite team is trying to get after him.
Is Jeff Toole going to surpass Thad Lewis during the I can't even believe I'm asking this question.
I was waiting to see how long into the show that you were going to ask that question because of the commenter.
One of our comments from a guy named Kello, Kello. It's like Jello, but with a K. Mentioned Chris Brown talking a lot about Jeff Toole in over at BuffaloBills.com, saying that it could be a real battle shaping up. Do you think it's going to be a battle? Do you think obviously someone cares, but do you think it's going to be a battle worth watching this preseason, knowing that E.J. Manuel cemented as the starter?
Well, I guess I really haven't considered it too much at this point. I mean, we're 2 training camp practices in, but I think those 2 will definitely be on the roster. I don't think there's any jeopardy being sent their way by Dennis Dixon being on this roster right now. But with whether it be Jeff Toole or Thad Lewis, I guess that's something that I'm going to have to keep a closer eye on because, like you said, E.J. Manuel cemented, and he's that number 1 guy. So that competition really isn't there. But I think they like Thad Lewis, honestly. And I know that they might be looking at Jeff Toole as a potential long-term backup, but is he there yet? I don't know. I didn't see too much from him last year, and I guess I'll just have to wait and see this training camp to exactly diagnose what he is right now.
Yeah. Anyway, well, before we move to the defense, we're with Joe Buscaglia from WGR 550 Sports Radio in Buffalo, and we have a few things from our comments section that I want to go over. First of all, Sergeant Major Thor is one of our top commenters during our Buffalo Rumblings live shows, and he continuously likes to comment on the attire that I am wearing. And so he was the first one to notice that it looks like the 2 of us are wearing the same shirt, and we have the same headphone buds. And he essentially called you my younger brother, but I don't see the resemblance because I outweigh you by probably, even though you're 6'3" or 6'4", whatever, I probably outweigh you by 60 pounds because you're a skinny little dude.
Yeah, I'm a skinny dude. And you know what? That's the thing. People always say, "Hey, you know what? You should eat a sandwich." But dude, I pack it on. It's just I just can't gain weight. I'm sorry. I'm an ectomorph. I'm an ectomorph.
You can still fit into those skinny jeans that Ryan Fitzpatrick was talking about, I'm sure.
Oh, God. I mean, I got more flack for skinny jeans, and I only wore them once to practice. And I'll just tell you the story behind it. He comes up to me after practice, and Fitzpatrick goes, "Hey, Joe, what actually, he called me Skaggs because that was the nickname for me because he was called Fitz. He called me Skaggs. It's like, what size is your waist? He's like, me, Brom, and Levi have a bet going. So I told him, and he's like, told you guys. And from there, it was just the skinny jeans fiasco, and he put me on blast on the air with Howard and Jeremy. That's where it all came from.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they let you forget about it very quickly, right?
Yeah, it was only an open for about 3 years.
That's true. Yeah, now it's different opens. But the other thing I had to talk to from the comment section was that apparently Brian Galliford's cat, let me get the name here, Sally. Brian Galliford's cat, Sally, is riveted to the video of you.
Oh, yeah.
It's just sitting in front of his monitor staring at you. It must be the hair. Must be the hair.
Yeah, I guess it must be. I just got a camp cut, so thank you, Sally. And thank you, what was it, Sergeant Major Thor?
Sergeant Major Thor, yes, SMT, as we like to refer to him.
Well, thank you both for acknowledging the great attire of the blue shirts, and Sally, I got you.
Wow. We try not to talk to the cats because they like to interrupt our podcast when Brian's talking, or like they come into the view of the camera like this. And anyway. So let's get back on task here and go to the defense. We talked about most of the starting defensive line already, but we haven't talked about the most expensive man on the roster, Mario Williams. Doug Marrone had an interesting quote after practice today about something about Mario Williams looks really happy or something like that. Were you there for that? Did you hear him say that?
Yeah, I heard him say that, and I'm like, well, okay. I just wanted to know exactly what it was.
Was it unprovoked? Did someone ask a question about Mario Williams being chipper or something?
No, I mean it was just about Mario Williams being in this defense, and Marone kind of said, hey, you know what? It's the happiest I've seen him, and I mean that kind of came out of nowhere. We talked to Mario afterwards, and it's like, okay, why are you so happy? That was a serious question today. But with Mario said, you know, I don't really want to get into it, but you know, I just really enjoying playing football. So whatever. I mean, that was one of the weirdest conversations today, for sure.
All right, I guess we'll just leave it at that. So, Stephon Charles getting some reps at defensive tackle for Darius. Do we know when Alan Branch is coming back?
No, he's on the non-football illness list too.
But he's been on there since last week, so it wasn't a conditioning test thing. It was something else, right? Right,
and I'm not sure what it is. I saw him out there working with trainers today. He was doing the same thing on Sunday too. So I think with Branch, it's a wait and see mode. But they essentially said the same thing on Sunday, that they're going to go through tests, and once he's cleared, he'll be out there. It didn't really have the same sort of drama as the Cordy Glenn situation, but maybe because that's because he's less important to the roster. I mean, he's important, but not as important as the starting left tackle on the team.
It's probably true. Let's not talk about Kiko Alonso. It's just going to make us cry.
Okay. Talk about Nigel Bradham, though.
There we go. Yeah. Nigel Bradham's been taking a lot of the reps. How has he looked, especially in coverage, because that's where his biggest question mark is going to be?
I like Nigel Bradham a lot, and I liked him as a rookie. I think he took a step back last year, and certainly he was in the doghouse with Doug Marrone following the incident after the second preseason game. That is for sure. And I wrote a story about Nigel earlier today, actually, and I caught up with him last night after practice, and he brought up the incident unprovoked and said, hey, you know what? I've matured from this. I know that I need to be better than that. It kind of put me at the lowest peg and right as a rookie again, and I need to work my way back up. And I like that attitude. And Marrone and Jim Schwartz have certainly seen that renewed attitude as he went to OTAs and all the off-season workouts. They thought he had a very nice camp and improved himself. I think it also helps that he's back in a 4-3 and trying to, because that's what he's done his entire career. He was a weak side linebacker at Florida State. He tried to become a strong side linebacker in his first year in the 4-3 with Chan Gailey, and it looked almost like he was going to be destined for one of those 3-4 inside linebacker jobs last year, but didn't come to fruition because he got in the doghouse. And now Nigel Bradham so far has looked pretty good. He's getting all the reps as the weak side linebacker, and it's too soon to say it's his job to lose, but he's done a nice job so far, and I think he's going to continue to get those reps.
And on the other side, how has Keith Rivers looked?
Well, Keith Rivers has manned the strong side position. Haven't really noticed him too much of diagnosing plays and making them look easy. He wasn't Kikoing the practice by any means, but he's been very.
You mentioned.
You know what? Hey, listen, it's my job, Matt. I'm sorry that I mentioned Kiko's name, but no. And Keith Rivers, he has been consistent so far. Hasn't really stood out one way or the other. I'm sure we'll get to see more and more once the pads come on and things start to get a little bit more physical.
Right, because he's going to be the guy that's kind of sticking his nose up in there a little bit more, wouldn't you say?
Right, and Nigel Bradham, how he described the weak side linebacker, is a role that allows you to freestyle a little bit more, his words, not mine, and it allows you to roam as a linebacker, and I think that's really what benefits Bradham, certainly, because he's a very instinctive player, even going back to his days at Florida State. He doesn't have quite the reaction time as the man who shall not be named, unless Matt's going to cry.
Good.
There, but I think it will help him get to perhaps a level that he wants to. And it's going into a big year. It's his third year in the league at this point.
How has Stephon Gilmore looked, I guess, moving to the cornerbacks? How has he looked without being able to press coverage? Because that was kind of the big knock when he hurt his wrist. He said he couldn't get up and jam receivers, and of course, without pads on, he's probably not going to be doing that either.
So they're jamming receivers. They're jamming receivers, all right. And both he and Leotis are doing it. I think all the cornerbacks are making a concerted effort to be physical at the line of scrimmage when called upon to do it. And Gilmore's done it, and I think Gilmore's had a nice camp so far. He hasn't stood out like a sore thumb like he did last year just yet. But I like what he's done so far. I can't wait to watch him versus Sammy Watkins as training camp goes along.
How's the rest of the cornerback depth chart shaking out? Is Nickel Roby getting the first look at nickel with, or is it Corey Graham?
It's Nickel Roby right now, and Corey Graham's getting the second team outside corner looks. I think that's the smartest way to go about it, in my opinion, because I think Nickel Roby is a very good player, and that nickel role is perfect for him. I mean, he's not tall, he's not big, but he reads plays so well. I mean, if there's a screen coming and he is on the field, he's probably sniffing it out. He's done it almost every single time I've seen him on the field throughout OTAs and mini camp and now in the 2 days of training camp. So I think with him, he's someone to keep an eye out for that. Corey Graham, I'm not sold on Leotis McKelvin just yet. I'm really not. And I liked his year last year, and I know I'll probably take flack for this, but I need to see more. I need to see that last year wasn't the anomaly, and that's what it all boils down to for me. And I think Corey Graham can go in and be matchup based. I think he can also be insurance for Leotis McKelvin and provide that special teams role as well.
Right, and even before they signed him, he was one of my top free agent targets because he could do all the things you said. He can play the outside stuff. He can match up against some taller wide receivers that Nickel Roby just physically can't do that against. And then if McKelvin or Gilmore, well, I mean, you saw what happened last year when a few of those guys went down and got hurt. I mean, we're throwing out another guy who shall not be named. But Ron Brooks has been not Justin Rogers. Brooks has,
I know who you're talking about. I remember.
Don't tell anyone. But Ron Brooks has not had the greatest reviews during training camp so far. Do you think he's in danger of losing his job?
Yes, 100% yes. I think I thought he was in danger of losing. I'm not saying he's going to get cut, but I think he's in danger certainly. And I thought that way ever since they drafted and approached the offseason the way that they did. They wanted to get deeper. They've given him chances, and he has not performed. It's that simple. And now he's getting to a point where he has to show that he has improvement. It's the same story with T.J. Graham. I mean, these are two guys with raw ability. T.J. Graham is speedy down the field. Ron Brooks, it seems like he has the pieces to be a good cornerback, but for whatever reason, the two guys just haven't gotten better since they've gotten to Buffalo. And that's a major concern for the Bills, and I think that will be addressed. And their jobs may depend on it. I think Ron Brooks is definitely in jeopardy here, especially if they want to keep a bigger type of cornerback at the bottom of the depth chart.
Mm-hmm. Would that be guys, say, like Ross Cockrell?
Well, Cockrell will be on the team, and so
okay.
there's already 5 spots spoken for on the cornerback depth chart. When you add in Roby, McKelvin, Gilmore, and Graham, that's 5 spots already. I mean, you might keep 6, and do you keep a guy like Brandon Smith, who's a little bit more of a project, former wide receiver that converted over to corner? Do you keep one of these other young guys who might show some things at camp, like a Kamal McElwain, or I don't have the roster in front of me, so I can't think.
There's only 90. Only 90.
Yeah, of course. But there are some guys on this roster that could push for a 6th spot and maybe they say, hey, you know what? We're comfortable with the 5 guys that we have. Let's keep another roster spot at a different position. Is Ron Brooks going to prevent them from doing that? I'm not sure that he is.
Finally, at the back end, at the safety position, now that Jarris Byrd is gone, what difference have you seen in Aaron Williams, just in how he kind of approaches his job at that safety position through this offseason and into the first couple practices of training camp?
Oh, Aaron Williams is a different guy this year in terms of comfort and knowing his role and kind of assuming a leadership role on that defense. He has stood out to me in the first 2 days. I think Aaron Williams has a chance to be a very, very good player, and the Bills feel the same way, and they signed him to a very lucrative contract with only a year to work with at the safety position. It was a big leap for them, but they believed in him, and I think that belief is helping him from a mental standpoint. I think that was one of his biggest hurdles in the first couple of years. No, he wasn't a corner, and that part of it was concerning because he was kind of miscast. But once he got into that role where he was comfortable and they started to give him responsibilities. I mean, he's right where he needs to be. He's going to be perfect for that free safety role. He's not going to be as instinctive as Jairus Byrd, but he has the athleticism to make up for maybe the lack of instincts that he has compared to Jairus Byrd. So I like Aaron Williams a lot.
Okay. What about the rest of the safeties? Is Denoris Searcy been the main guy getting the reps next to Aaron Williams?
Yes, yeah, they haven't wavered from that just yet. I wonder if they're going to, because the second team unit right now has Duke Williams as the free and Jonathan Meeks as the strong, and they're not really cross-training Duke Williams right now. Now, that's not to say that they can't do it as camp kind of moves along, but it just makes you question Denoris Searcy getting all the reps. Is that maybe more decided than what we initially thought? I think that's a legitimate question. So it's Denoris Searcy is a little bit worrisome because I think he's a liability in coverage. And despite him having, I think, an interception for a touchdown last year, yeah, he had an interception for a touchdown last year. But I still think he is a person that you have to consider as to whether or not he is going to be able to help out in that side of things. And is that an arena where you might bring in a Corey Graham to potentially line up in the back area and let Denoris Searcy drop down into the box to be a big nickel linebacker sort of deal, big nickel safety. He's very good against the run, but it's all about the coverage to me that I'm worried about.
Alfred, our editor-in-chief, had assumed that Searcy was going to be kind of that nickel linebacker kind of drop into coverage role, and then somebody coming in over the top, whether it was Corey Graham or Duke Williams or something like that, to come in and play safety. But we haven't seen anything like that, have we?
No, nothing quite yet. And
they're getting there.
Yeah, they're getting there. They're still formulating their game plans. They're just getting these guys into shape and getting ready for that first padded practice, I think. So I'm expecting to see a little bit more variations of these formations once we get into the through the first week and into that second week.
You want to talk about the long snapper competition?
Is there one?
No, there isn't.
Garrison Sanborn's my guy, man. I've watched him. I've watched him for a very long time, and he has never screwed up to me.
Well, that's good. That's his job. Who's taking snaps as the backup the other day? Was it Lee Smith?
Lee Smith was practicing it. Wasn't exactly good at it. We kind of knew that Mike Cosson was on his last legs because they brought him in during the positional portion of practice during minicamp to try his hand at long snapping. So you could kind of tell that the end was near for Mr. Cosson. But he hooked down with the Redskins today, so good for him.
Yes, that's nice. What about the punter competition? Is Brian Moorman going to have one more season?
I think so, unless Dombrowski really comes out and has a good camp. I mean, I tracked their hang times yesterday, and Moorman was notoriously better than Dombrowski. Moorman, it was they were punting from around the 50-yard line and trying to trap the players, and Moorman just unearthed this beauty where he landed it around the 2-yard line. It was in the air for 5.35 seconds. It was just absolutely perfect, and that was the best kick of the day. And unless Dombrowski is consistently better than Moorman, I think Moorman's got another year in him.
And that's why they brought him back with Danny Crossman wanting higher hang time, right? Isn't that?
Yeah. It was less about directional kicking, which was a big Bruce DeHaven tenet, and that's why they went with Sean Powell, and more about that hang time and allowing their guys to get down there.
Okay. Yeah. Just one or two other questions from the comments section before I ask you about your most talented list.
Okay.
If there's one player that used to play for Buffalo that's still currently in the league that could come back and play for the team, who would it be?
Wow.
Is it a guy like Jairus Byrd?
Yeah, it's Byrd. It's Byrd. I've been a big fan of Byrd ever since I watched him in his sophomore season, so to speak. I think he is immensely talented. I think he's someone that has instincts that you don't really get from the safety position too often. And even though he is a little bit on the wrong side of genetics, just in terms of football players, he makes up for it just with his mind and his preparation. I mean, I just enjoy just standing there and talking to Jarris Bird about different things. He's a very deep thinker, and I think he's the guy I would probably pick for that.
Okay, I like that question, so I decided to ask it because it's my show. We're here with Joe Buscaglia from WGR 550, and one of the things that he does over there is writes these lovely little off-season columns. Well, he writes them during the season too, but one of the things he did to kind of get us from the start of July to the start of training camp was to list the Bills' top 20 talents. And my first question is, how dare you, Joe?
What?
How dare you?
Who'd I forget?
Oh, I didn't think you forgot anybody. Isn't that just everybody's reaction? Someone's got to be upset.
Yeah, it usually is the way things go. But you know what? I'm happy with how it turned out. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Got people talking, got people excited about football. I think for at least a little bit, and that was the goal.
The only real kind of question I had about it was, do you think that you put Sammy Watkins too high? I know that he's got a high ceiling, but without having proven anything in the NFL, do you think you put him too high?
No, because I think the projection aspect really wins out for me. I mean, I looked at it from 3 different perspectives, and I outlined it in most of the times that I did the top 20. But I looked at it from an overall raw talent level and just raw skill. And the second part of that equation was, how have they done at the NFL level? Which, of course, Sammy Watkins doesn't have anything at this point. But the third part of it is projection into the future and how well they project into the NFL. And Sammy Watkins is an absolute home run for that. And the first part of it, the raw skill level in being one of the most talented players, talented receivers coming out of college since A.J. Green and Julio Jones. I mean, that part of it is there for him. So, no, I don't think I overvalued him on that list. I think where he was slotted, I could have very easily put him at number 1, but because Marcell Dareus had that sort of progression, the overwhelming progression last year, I couldn't place Dareus underneath Watkins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've got an awful lot of first-round picks and second-round picks to choose from, and then of course Kyle Williams. So.
High picks too.
Yeah. Well, the Bills have had enough of them. Yeah. So that kind of helps. Well, is there anything else you wanted to say to our viewers here at Buffalo Rumblings Live before we let you get back to dorm living?
Well, honestly, I know I don't really get a chance to talk to everybody like this, but I just want to thank everybody for helping me be a part of the Bills coverage. I mean, it's a job that I don't take for granted. It's a job that I love doing. I'm a junkie. I'm a football nerd. I hope it comes across that way, and I just love interacting and informing people about football. So honestly, I'm getting a little cheesy here, but I just really want to thank everybody for allowing me to do my job and I guess caring what I have to say.
See, that's what Buffalo Rumblings Live offers, is that we don't have sponsors to worry about. You can say whatever you want, and we can talk about your hair and everything like that, too. That's good. Well, I want to thank Joe Buscaglia for joining us on Buffalo Rumblings Live, and we are going back to our weekly format starting right about now. So we'll see you sometime next week with a brand new guest, and thanks a lot, Joe.
Thanks, Matt.